One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. What are content boundaries? And why are they important? And how do they contribute to the overall success of your content? So boundaries are an interesting topic, and it's one that I actually love to talk about because it's been one of those things that I have been perpetually trying to overcome, being a lifelong people pleaser. Yeah, like I did. I was always the yes girl that was like, okay, yes, I want you to like me. I want to be in your good graces. I know this is dumb as it sounds. I'm actually going to say it out loud. I want to be the good girl that follows the rules. And people pleasing is what I did for a very long time in my life. And I sacrificed so much with that. And so when it comes to my content, I love to set up boundaries so that I no longer have to make sacrifices. I don't have to go back and forth with a guest that's like, oh, I can only do it at this time. Like, can you move your schedule just a little bit? Or having that boundary of, I have a hard stop at this time and I know I'm going to stop recording. And so creatively, I can stop my solo episodes at that time because that's what I've said. That is the boundary that I have placed on myself and on my content. So we're going to dive into boundaries today, and it's going to get a little sticky. It's going to get a little uncomfortable, but it's a conversation that we need to have. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so this is a fun episode today because I'm doing something a little different. I always tell you like the behind the scenes of what's going on. And typically I will plan episodes maybe on paper or directly in Asana, but either way, I usually transfer everything over to Asana and I'm looking at that as my notes while I'm recording. But I didn't have time for that today. I'm actually reading my handwritten notes on today's episode because I want to show you that it all isn't about doing it one way forever and ever. Sometimes you have to adjust and do what works for whatever you have going on that day. And so I'm reading my notes like straight in my notebook and we're going to see how this goes because I'm like, ooh, I'm reminded why I like to do this in Asana because it's way more organized, but we're just going to have a go at it and we're going to see how this works today. But I do have 3 important things I want to share with you about content boundaries. And we already talked about the importance of them and what they are. But I wanted to give you a very specific example. So this is our number 1. I don't let anyone that just emails me or pitches me to be on the podcast because I have boundaries. And I want that to be like the recurring mantra of today's episode. I want you to leave this and say, I have boundaries, because it really helps you create like this filter for your show. And so, like I said, here's an example. Does this person offer value to my audience? Is it a relevant topic? Do we have any common connections? So this is the filter that I will go through if I read an email to me that is someone, either an agency pitching someone pitching themselves, or a virtual assistant or somebody pitching on someone else's behalf. Like those are the questions that I ask. This is my filter for if someone's going to be a guest on the show. And just another quick side note about people coming onto the Profit Podcast, it typically doesn't come through an email pitch. It does happen sometimes, but that's usually not what happens. What will happen because of the boundary that I've created around this show is I will find someone or they will find me and we create a relationship first. And then I'm like, well, it's no brainer. Why don't you come on my podcast and talk about it? That's what's happened for the last few interviews that you've heard on this show. Some of them were blind email pitches, right? I didn't know who they were. It was a cold pitch. And others were people that I met at conferences and people that I met and I just truly enjoyed their company. And I'm like, you know what? You should come on the podcast. Like it was a very simple decision to have them onto the show. But those are my boundaries with interviews for the podcast. So what are your boundaries? Like who do you want to come onto the show? I have seen where podcasts will explicitly state, like if they have like a pitch, like Google form or Jot form or any of those, and it will say on there, do you have a 6 or 7 figure business? Like that is the filter of their podcast. They only want people coming on the show that can share their lived experience because that's the audience that they are appealing to. So even if you're just starting out or you've been at this a while, you can always change the boundaries around your podcast guest requirements or who you're going to have on the show. But I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to have boundaries around the type of people that you have guesting in your content and you're inviting them in. Because let's be honest, like I've wasted so much time. I've wasted hours and hours of my life with the wrong people in the other interview seat. Like I'm interviewing them and in my mind, I'm actively thinking, why is this person on the show? Like, why is this happening? And it doesn't happen often now. I will say it's not something that happens today, but oh my gosh, the first 2 years of my podcast were, why are we having this conversation? Like I'm actively thinking in my mind, this was a terrible mistake. This person should not be on the podcast because they either eventually become super self-promotional or they can't really articulate and formulate ideas to keep a conversation going. So that makes my job harder. So I have intentionally set up these boundaries around my content interviews, and that's how I look at them. So cannot scream this enough, okay? I have boundaries. It's the reoccurring theme. But I already mentioned this, but this is my second point. I think of boundaries as the filters that my decisions go through. So here's another example. I try not to record anything more than once a week after 5 p.m. This is another boundary that I have for my schedule and for my family. So when I open up my calendar, I'll have a few like after school type hours throughout the month, but it's not like a daily occurrence. I definitely don't have like a Monday through Friday, pick whatever time you want between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. No. That is like few and far between. And those actually probably won't happen at all in the summertime because I have different intentions. I have different seasons of life. I have different boundaries around my content depending on the months of the year. Same thing goes for around the holidays. I won't schedule any interviews in December. And I used to feel like, oh my gosh, like who, like asking myself, right? Like I'm totally like multiple personalities here when I say this, but it's like, who are you to think that you can say, I don't interview people in December? If someone wants to be on your podcast or wants to have an interview with you in December, you say yes. That is the ex-people pleaser in me that wants to say yes to everything. But the woman that's screaming, I have boundaries says, no, you are very busy in December and you deserve a break and you deserve time off. So we're not scheduling anything in December. Okay. I have boundaries. So that's how I look at this. When I look at the calendar slots for when I'm interviewing someone or going to be on someone else's podcast, I always make sure that it is accommodating my schedule first and foremost. This is such a healthy way to set boundaries around your content, and it will keep you from burning out. I feel like there's more and more people that are coming to me saying, I'm burned out. How do I get excited about my content again? How do I want to record and have fun, energy, and feel creative and innovative behind my show? And the first thing I do is I ask them to show me what their current production schedule looks like, or what are they currently doing that's stressing them out. And most people say, well, I'm recording, 3 episodes a week because I'm guesting on shows and I'm doing my own stuff. I'm recording stuff, then I'm putting out multiple episodes a week. I'm putting 2 to 3 episodes out every single week. And I'm like, well, that's your problem. Why are you creating so much content? And I realize this is coming from someone that's created a lot of content in my past. And we won't even talk about 2021 when things were real wild and I was creating a ton of content. I almost burned out that year, but I look back and I say, oh, that's why I have the boundaries that I have today so that I don't have burnout. So if you find yourself getting into this space of, why am I doing so much? This isn't fun anymore. The goal was to do this, and now I find myself doing that. Go back to, I have boundaries. And if at any point you can set new boundaries around your content, it's not something that you set once and say, well, I decided this at the very beginning of my podcast, so I guess I got to keep it going. No, you don't. You can change this at any time. And you may have heard me say this once. I will say it 1,000 more times. There are no rules to podcasting. You make them up. They are guidelines that you live by. I don't have any rules for my podcast. I have guidelines that help me stay consistent and keep putting out fresh content, new content. But if I want to change everything tomorrow, I can do that because it's my show. It is my content. So if you have it in your mind that you can't change things I'm giving you the permission slip right now. Do you want me to write it down for you? I will write it down on my pen and paper. I'm actually not writing. I'm just kind of scribbling, but I want you to get that audio like sound effect where it sounds like I'm scribbling something. That's me writing on my notebook. You have permission to set your own boundaries. You have permission to create anything the way that you want to create it, even if it's something that I told you. And this is where I feel like this weird guilt, shame, whatever you want to call it, when someone comes to me and says, well, I listened to an episode of your podcast where you said X, Y, and Z. And I immediately say back to them and say, yeah, but why are you listening to me? And they'll say, what are you talking? Like, it's that blank stare, like stumbling over their words. Like, what? You're my podcast coach. Like you're telling me what to do. And I'm like, yeah, but those are just suggestions. Those are guidelines. There aren't any rules. You make up your own rules. Please make up your own rules. Please contradict whatever I say. I'm just telling you what I have seen work for myself and other podcasters in this community. But that doesn't mean that you have to take everything at face value and do everything step by step by step. I want you to create your own boundaries, your own filters, and that is how you will make podcasts successful for you because you make the rules. You make it fun. You have the ability to be creative. You have the permission to do whatever you want with your show. So I want you to take that liberty and run with it. Create new boundaries if you must. Create new guidelines for your show. I don't care what you do. I just want you to have boundaries in place and have those filters for when you're recording your show or when you're making decisions about your show. So super important. And I especially want you to apply this to your calendars. I know we've already talked about calendars a few times, but having those hard starts and hard stops will help you as well. And what I mean by that is I don't record anything past 5 p.m. other than a few times a month, like a few times a month. And most months out of the year, that's not going to happen anyway. The summer months, not happening. December, not happening. I won't record anything. And that's a hard boundary that I have set for myself because I do not want you to burn out. And if all of my calendar spaces fill up and someone says, oh, I really want to be on your show, but you don't have anything available, I say, oh, okay, well, there's the next month. You can try again then. And I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about saying, oh, I should accommodate this person. They really want to be on my show. Sorry, it's my show. Like, sorry, not sorry. I'm going to have my calendar be this way because, say it with me, I have boundaries. Okay. The third thing, and this is another really important type of boundary that I want to share with you is
being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
why it's so important is the format of your content. Now, the format of your content, I don't like to say, again, that you have to do it this way because there are no rules. But when I decide the format of my content, I think about it in a few different ways. So the first one is deciding how long my episode's going to be. So this podcast that I'm recording right now, before I ever hit record, I decided on the time boundary of this episode. It wasn't just going to be 7 minutes and then we shut the thing off. I'm also definitely not going to 45 minutes because that is way too long for a solo episode. But I decided on a time length that I wanted this episode to be, and that is the boundary for this episode. So you can think about it in terms of creative boundaries or content boundaries. Those could be used interchangeably, but the same goes with your interviews. Whenever I start recording, I'm automatically thinking in my head, okay, this cannot go over 45 minutes. Or if we have plenty of time, then I say, okay, we can't go over 60 minutes from when the guest enters the interview space to whenever it's time to leave. We have 60 minutes. So whether we spend that time gabbing and catching up, or we just, get in there, you ready? I'm ready. Okay, boom, hit record and let's get started. This is all up to you. These are those creative boundaries that I want you to have in place. So again, whether it's a solo or an interview episode or your interview content, that boundary will help you keep everything in check, like have those time constraints so that you can make fewer decisions. And this goes back to the filters that we were just talking about. I find that I have more creative freedom and I can actually do more when I have a creative constraint to deal with. And that would be the episode length for this episode today. Like, for example, I am at, this is super meta. I'm telling you about a podcast while I'm recording a podcast. I realize that, but bear with me here. I'm looking at this and we are almost at 18 minutes of me recording this episode. Now that's without any ads or anything dynamic content inserted into this episode, but we're at 18 minutes. And my goal was to record today's episode to be around 23 minutes long. That was what I was shooting for. So it gives me this creative space to now say, okay, you've been recording for 18 minutes. You need to record for at least 5 more to hit that 23-minute mark. What else can you talk about? And if you haven't realized at this point, I'm vamping a little bit. I'm improvising. I'm getting a little creative because I hit the bottom of my list. I shared the 3 things about content boundaries that I wanted to share with you today, but I haven't hit that boundary of 23 minutes. So I have to get creative and I have to think, well, what are some other things that I can share? So I encourage you to do this too. Before you ever start recording anything, have that episode length. How long do I want this to be? I don't care if it's 5 minutes or 45 minutes. I want you to have this set before you ever hit record because that boundary will help you be creative and share things and add in more content or take it away. Like you'll know after you finish recording something and you sit down, you're like, man, we recorded that interview for an hour and a half. It was only supposed to be 45 minutes. Now I know for next time that I need to cut it off because I ended up spending an extra hour editing that episode and it was hard to find breaks where I could cut stuff out and have a very clean finished file. So super important. I could go on and on about content boundaries, but like I already told you, this episode is meant to be around 23 minutes, so I only have a little bit more to share. But I want to just really encourage you to think about creative boundaries and content boundaries because the fewer decisions that you have to make when you're creating something, the easier it gets to create the thing. I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's totally true. So let me do a quick recap. So the first thing is I don't let anyone pitch me and just be on the podcast because number one, I have boundaries. So I have that filter. This is the second one actually. Have those filters to make those decisions easier. And another form of content or creative boundaries is the format of your content. It helps you already have those decisions made so that that filter is already preset around the type of content you're creating, whether it's a solo episode, an interview episode, the episode length, or how you're going to record it, whether it's audio only or audio and video, you have less decisions to make. You've already made all those decisions before you ever even come to record your content. And you can actually save these. This is actually top of mind. I was just recording this in the new version of Profit Podcasting. I've been recording all the videos all day today. So this is top of mind for me. But in your content calendar, you can actually include that in there too. You can have those boundaries set where you're like, you know what? I want to record this for 25 minutes. I want to have this be audio only. I want this one to be audio and video. There's a lot of options that you can play around with when it comes to setting those boundaries. And I think using a tool like your content calendar helps you keep things in perspective. You could even mark on there, oh, I want this one to be promotional, so I remember to mention something that I'm promoting, or I want this one to be educational because I'm seeding my audience for an upcoming launch or promotion that I have, or I haven't done a tough love episode in a while, so I want this one to be purely motivational. Make all of these decisions ahead of time. This will help you set and keep those creative content boundaries. Oh my gosh, we did this. This was such a good, I have been so excited about sharing this because people ask me all the time about boundaries. And I actually read this book several years ago. It's called Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. I highly recommend it. If you struggle with any kind of boundaries, it is super helpful. I'll link to it in the show notes for this episode, but we've made it to the end. This is fantastic. This was such a great episode. If you have questions around boundaries or other ideas for what we could talk about when it comes to content or creative boundaries, shoot me an email. I want to hear from you. Or even better, go to our pod inbox page. Go to podinbox.com/the Profit Podcast and submit your question. I want to hear from you. You can give me a question and record an audio clip. Tell me the name of your podcast. Tell me your question, and I would be happy to answer it on a listener submitted question segment that we'll have in the future. But that's all I have for you today. So take a screenshot wherever you're listening to this and tag me on Instagram. I want to hear what you thought about content boundaries and maybe share a boundary that you've set for your own content. If you're listening to this episode on your favorite podcast player, please hit that follow or subscribe button because it will update you whenever you have or whenever we have new podcast episodes. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.